It didn't happen at the wedding. People always assume that's where things break. A dramatic moment. Public fracture. Some loud rejection under chandeliers and polite applause. But no, nothing that honest ever happened there. It happened months later, at a large family dinner in a Sacramento suburb. The kind of neighborhood built to look peaceful from a distance. Identical roofs, clean sidewalks, lawns trimmed down to obedience. The kind of place where nothing ugly is supposed to exist, even when it does. The table was long. Too long. Enough chairs to make sure no one sat close enough to notice what was really happening. Plates were set perfectly. Glasses aligned. Silverware arranged with care, like presentation mattered more than truth. Conversation drifted easily. Future plans? Possible moves? Vague talk about what's next. Calm voices. Soft laughter. Relatives nodding along as if everyone shared the same vision. From the outside, we looked flawless. That illusion mattered to them more than anything else. I sat in my chair, posture straight, hands folded when they weren't lifting a fork. I knew my role. I had learned it over the years. Speak when spoken to. Smile when expected. Pay without being seen. I had funded most of what surrounded us. The house. The renovations. The stability that allowed nights like this to exist. Years of consistent labor. Years of being reliable in ways that never make stories worth telling. No one mentioned that part. They never do. Across the table sat Megan, my stepdaughter. Calm. Composed. She wore confidence the way some people wear jewelry. Lightly, deliberately, as if she'd always known it belonged to her. She wasn't hostile toward me. She didn't need to be. Indifference cuts deeper when it's practiced. I remember noticing how relaxed she looked. No tension in her shoulders. No uncertainty in her expression. That should have warned me. Midway through the meal, during a pause in conversation, one of those quiet gaps where someone usually rushes to fill the silence, she looked directly at me. Not past me. Not around me. At me. She smiled. Polite. Controlled. Almost kind. And then she spoke. She said the best gift I could give the family would be to disappear from their lives forever. The words landed softly. No venom. No raised voice. No anger. That was the most disturbing part. It didn't sound like a reaction. It sounded like a conclusion. She said I was meddling. That I interfered too much. That I disrupted the image of a perfect family. She said I was holding everyone back. Complicating things that didn't need to be complicated. Image. That word echoed louder than the rest. Not love. Not belonging. Image. Around the table, the reaction was subtle. Forks paused, then continued. Someone cleared their throat. A relative shifted in their seat. No one challenged her. No one told her she'd gone too far. Silence, shared and deliberate. I looked down at my plate for a moment, then back up. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't angry yet. I felt something colder begin to settle in. I turned toward my wife, Laura. I didn't expect a speech. I didn't expect fireworks. I expected resistance. Even a reflexive one. A raised eyebrow. A soft correction. Something that said this isn't okay. She nodded. Just once. Small. Controlled. Almost careful. That nod told me everything Megan's words hadn't. This wasn't new. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't said for the first time at that table. These conversations had happened already, quietly, privately, without me. The dinner wasn't a confrontation. It was confirmation. I felt the room shift. Not outwardly. Internally. Like a final beam being removed from a structure that had already been leaning. I didn't argue. I didn't remind anyone who had paid for the house they were sitting in. I didn't list the years, the sacrifices, the steady presence that had allowed them to build this illusion of harmony. I stayed silent. That silence unsettled them more than anger ever could have. Megan's smile tightened for just a fraction of a second. Someone changed the subject too quickly. My wife adjusted her napkin like it suddenly required her full attention. I finished my meal. Every bite tasted dull, like texture without flavor. The rest of the evening passed as if nothing had happened. Polite goodbyes, casual hugs, promises to do this again soon. The performance resumed because it had to. I walked out alone. I didn't go home. I drove. No destination. Just movement. Eventually, I found myself sitting in the parking lot of a closed grocery store. The kind with flickering fluorescent lights and empty spaces stretching in every direction. I turned the engine off and sat there in the dark. That's when it came, not rage, not grief. Clarity. I hadn't been rejected in a moment. I had been tolerated for years. My usefulness had been mistaken for acceptance. My silence for consent. My endurance for weakness. They didn't want me gone because I was cruel or absent or irresponsible. They wanted me gone because I disrupted the picture. And sitting there, alone, I realized something that changed everything. When people only value you for what you provide, your presence becomes optional the moment it challenges their comfort. Something inside me went quiet. Not broken. Resolved. And I understood this dinner wasn't the end. It was the last warning I was ever going to get. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside Laura, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, steady and untroubled, as if nothing irreversible had happened hours earlier. The ceiling above us was dark. Familiar. The same ceiling I had stared at through years of compromise, telling myself endurance was the same thing as strength. My mind replayed the dinner without emotion. Megan's voice, calm, polite, surgical. The way my wife had nodded, not out of confusion but recognition. Agreement. That was the moment that kept returning. Not the words. The nod. It told me my place had already been negotiated in rooms I wasn't invited into. I wasn't a husband at that table. I wasn't a father. I was a variable they had decided to remove. Laura shifted slightly in her sleep. Her hand brushed my arm. Instinctive, unconscious. A reflex born from years of shared space, not shared loyalty. I felt nothing. By morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a decision already made. I moved through the rooms slowly, noticing details I had ignored for years. The framed photos where I stood slightly apart. The furniture I had chosen because others liked it. The walls painted in colors that were never mine. I poured coffee and didn't drink it. There was no rage in me, no urge to confront. I understood something clearly now. Explanations are wasted on people who have already agreed you don't belong. So I didn't explain. I waited. That afternoon, I sat in my car in the same grocery store parking lot. Engine off, phone balanced in my hand. The place smelled faintly of asphalt and dust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like insects trapped in glass. That's where I began. I canceled the wedding financing first. The venue deposit. The catering. Every polished detail meant to impress people who had already erased me from the picture. Each cancellation was met with surprise on the other end of the line. Confusion. Mild concern. I offered no explanation. Then I froze the shared accounts. Not out of spite. Out of necessity. I closed the doors quietly, the way you do when you know something behind you is already on fire. Next came the house. My name was the one on the deed. Always had been. I contacted a realtor and spoke in neutral tones. Like this was any other transaction. I scheduled an evaluation. Signed digital paperwork. Set timelines. All without drama. That night, Laura asked if something was wrong. I told her I was tired. She accepted that answer too easily. The days that followed were strange. Megan avoided me entirely. Laura moved around the house with careful politeness, as if sensing a shift she didn't want to acknowledge. No one apologized. No one asked what I was thinking. They didn't need to. They already believed the outcome favored them. When the first notifications arrived, accounts inaccessible, payments reversed, the confusion began. Laura stood in the kitchen staring at her phone, refreshing the screen like it might correct itself. She asked me what was happening. I told her the truth, but only once. I'm stepping away. No accusation. No anger. Just a statement. Her face tightened. Not with guilt. With fear. By the end of the week, the perfect family image began to crack. Renting wasn't possible without my income. Loans stalled. Relatives who had smiled at dinner suddenly had reasons not to answer calls. I watched it unfold from a distance, still present, already gone. When the house went on the market, I packed my things. Only what was mine: clothes, documents, a few objects that hadn't been chosen to impress anyone. No one tried to stop me. On my last night, I stood in the doorway and looked back once, at the space I had paid for, endured for, been erased inside. Laura didn't follow. I left before sunrise. By the time they understood what losing me actually meant, I was already gone. And for the first time in years, I felt light enough to breathe. It took only 3 days for the silence to turn into noise. I had left quietly. No slammed doors. No monologues. I thought maybe that would buy them dignity. Maybe they would process it in private, behind the same curtains they'd used to hide everything else. But dignity doesn't survive panic. And panic came quickly. The first calls weren't from Laura or Megan. They came from her cousins. 2 uncles. A friend of the family who'd always insisted I was like a brother. Suddenly their numbers lit up my phone, back to back. Their messages strangely similar. "Hey, just heard you're taking some time, but maybe don't make any big decisions?" They were never subtle. Some of them tried concern. Others tried guilt. A few didn't bother hiding the anger. "Laura's devastated." One message read. "Megan didn't mean what she said," claimed another. And one simply said, "We need to talk. You're blowing this way out of proportion." That one made me laugh. Alone, in a motel room 2 cities away, I laughed out loud at the idea that what I'd endured could even be measured, let alone exaggerated. Proportion? Let's talk about proportion. Proportion is financing a home you're not welcomed in. It's covering tuition while being told you're disposable. It's spending years absorbing emotional weather systems created by people who think their resentment is justified because you came after someone else. What I did wasn't disproportionate. It was overdue. Back in Sacramento, the dominoes began to fall faster. Without my income, Laura couldn't cover the mortgage. Her job barely kept the lights on. The house we had built together, on paper, legally under my name, was now a slow, sinking weight she couldn't carry alone. The payments bounced once, then twice. By the end of the 2nd week, she had called the realtor herself, just to talk options. I know because the realtor called me. I still had final authority. She was polite, professional, but even she couldn't hide the panic she'd heard in Laura's voice. She said it all happened suddenly, the woman explained. Asked if you'd changed your mind. I told her everything was still moving forward. I told the realtor to proceed. No delays. By the end of the month, the house was listed. Megan, meanwhile, learned what it meant to be cut off in real time. Her university account was frozen. Tuition, unpaid. Housing applications bounced back. The credit card she'd used for years, originally mine, then transferred to her name as a gesture of trust, was closed without ceremony. She'd used it to buy gifts once. Not for me, for her friends. Always gifts, always generous. When she believed the money came from somewhere safe and unshakable. Now, her group chats were full of apologies, excuses, blame she refused to direct at herself. I watched from the outside. I didn't speak. I didn't respond. I had said my last word when I walked out. Laura tried once, just once, to reach me directly. It was a short message. No greeting. No signature. "You're punishing us. You said you weren't that kind of man." I read it twice, then deleted it. She was wrong. This wasn't punishment. This was absence. And sometimes absence feels cruel only because the presence was never appreciated in the first place. What followed wasn't explosive. It was quieter, more humiliating. Megan reached out to her father, her real one, the man she still mentioned in photos and stories and quotes, as though his legacy was some kind of talisman. He was going to help, she said. He was making arrangements. But he didn't. He offered words, then delays, then silence. Megan posted vague frustrations online. Some people aren't who they seem. Family should show up. Her friends commented with fire emojis. Sympathy. But none of them knew who she was really talking about. None of them would have guessed it wasn't me. I never replied. They moved into an apartment shortly after. Small, unfurnished, close to a highway. The family dinners stopped. The smiles disappeared. The image, so carefully crafted, so publicly curated, crumbled into dust. Laura tried to hold it together. I'll give her that. She picked up extra shifts, cut expenses, swallowed pride. But she never called, never apologized, never sat with what she had allowed. Because that would mean admitting the nod at the dinner table hadn't been a mistake. It had been a decision. And decisions come with consequences. I didn't celebrate their struggle. But I didn't rescue them either. People ask if that makes me cold. I ask them, would you rebuild a home after the roof caved in? If the people inside had already packed your bags for you, would you go back? I live in a small town now, Arizona. Dry, still, quiet in the way that only distance can give you. The kind of quiet where mornings start without noise and end without expectations. I bought a modest house on the edge of town. 2 bedrooms, one of them empty. Sometimes I catch myself looking into it at night, wondering why I don't turn it into something useful. But I don't. Some rooms are meant to stay hollow. There's no echo of family here. No photographs on the fridge. No framed memories on the shelves. The coffee is always hot. The bills are always paid. No one knocks. No one complains. No one tells me I'm not enough while still holding out their hands. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. I know what they mean. They're asking about Laura, about Megan, about the house I left behind. They ask as if grief is the natural end of every departure. As if walking away always leaves some thread dangling, begging to be tied back together. I never correct them. I just say, not really, because how do you explain to someone that the thing you miss isn't people, but the version of yourself you once were? I used to believe effort could close any distance. I believed that presence over time would earn trust, that if I showed up, stayed quiet, paid what was owed, and waited long enough, they'd see me for what I was. Not a replacement, not a placeholder, but something solid, real. That's the lie most stepfathers tell themselves. We think love can be purchased slowly, like laying bricks in a wall that will one day hold a door. But no one ever gave me a key. I was always knocking, always waiting to be invited in. And I didn't realize until it was far too late that they had locked the door behind me the day I moved in. When Megan told me to disappear, she didn't invent that sentiment in the moment. She was simply voicing something they had all been rehearsing behind closed mouths. I was never part of the family. I was part of the arrangement. Useful, tolerated, silent. And when I stopped being silent, I stopped being needed. I've heard things, of course. Word travels even out here. Laura still lives in Sacramento, still works long hours, still avoids direct questions about what happened. Megan took a year off school, then returned with student loans. There's no more talk of weddings, no more family dinners. The illusion cracked, and once the audience left, the stage lights never came back on. They've never reached out. Not properly. A text once, from an unknown number. One word, why? I never replied, because if they didn't understand the answer then, they never will. People talk about forgiveness like it's a duty, like it's something you give out of principle. But I've learned something darker and truer. You don't forgive people who treat you like a stranger. You forget them. That's how survival works. You don't rage. You don't explain. You erase. And I've done exactly that. I have no pictures of them. No records. No reminders. Just memories I've sanded down to dull edges. They can't cut anymore. They only hum in the background now, like wind through an abandoned room. Some nights, I sit on the back porch, drink in hand, watching the desert shift colors. The sun drops fast out here. One moment it's gold, then it's rust, then it's gone. The sky doesn't linger. It lets go the second it has to. I've learned to do the same. Letting go isn't dramatic. It's not shouting or slamming doors or writing long letters no one reads. It's canceling tuition payments. It's freezing accounts. It's walking out before anyone has the chance to thank you, because you finally realize they never intended to. People call that cold. I call it clarity. I don't miss Megan's birthdays. I don't miss Laura's wine-drunk smiles in the kitchen. I don't miss paying for dinners where I was never invited into the conversation. I don't miss being the silent man at the head of a table built on someone else's history. What I miss, if anything, is the version of me that still believed all that effort meant something. He was a fool, but he was a good man. And now he's gone too. I've built a life without apologies. No one here knows who I used to be. When I say I live alone, they don't ask why. They assume it's by choice. And they're right. It is. I could start over. Meet someone. Try again. There are chances here. Smiles at grocery stores. Coffee shop conversations. But every time something like that begins to form, I remember the dinner. The nod. The silence that followed. And I remember how invisible a man can become inside his own home. That's the part no one warns you about. Not the rejection. The erasure. To be told, not with words but with gestures, that your place is temporary. That your sacrifices were only valid while they were convenient. That the love you gave was never actually seen. It was simply consumed. And when it ran out, so did their patience. Sometimes people say, but they must miss you. Maybe they do. Maybe they miss the things I paid for. The buffer I provided. The illusion of stability. But not me. If they missed me, they'd say so. And they haven't. That's the lesson. That's what stays with you long after the dust settles and the paperwork is finalized. You learn who they really were by the silence they leave behind. So now I ask you, was I wrong? Was I wrong to disappear from their lives? To let the structure collapse without warning, without rescue? To walk away not because I hated them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop bleeding for people who never brought bandages? Would you have stayed? Would you have sat at that table, month after month, smiling through the contempt, nodding through the dismissal, financing your own humiliation? Or would you have stood up? Would you have left the house you built, the people you supported, the life you thought you were shaping, because you finally realized it was shaping you into something smaller than you deserved to be? I don't need answers. I'm not asking for judgment. I'm asking for honesty. Because at some point in every man's life, he has to choose between being liked by the people who use him, or being alone with his dignity intact. I chose the latter. And in this silence, in this clean, hollow peace, I finally hear myself again. And that voice says, never again.